Okay, so first things first, Resident Evil 4 is the new remake in Capcom's ongoing survival horror series. The original came out around 20 years ago and was probably the most impressive game for its time, visually and in gameplay. Even today it still holds up as being one of, if not the greatest game ever made by many people, including myself, for its excellent level design, enemy variety, soundtrack, inventory management, and combat. Yes, there's a lot of things that fucking slap in this game. Many see it as the most iconic video game for the last 20 years, but period. I mean, fuck, some versions released with this chainsaw controller. Look at this fucking thing, it's insane. The game made an impact on the industry like no other, and was ultimately the entry that revitalized while simultaneously sending the series down a rough patch of mediocrity ahead of Resident Evil 6. Most games, if not every game after Resident Evil 4, were definitely inspired, the biggest one being Dead Space. I mean, the developers have even said that in an interview somewhere, I believe. So how does the remake stand against the original? Well, it's kinda complicated. Okay, so is it better than the original? The definitive way to experience this masterpiece? No, unfortunately it's not. But whoa, put the pitchfork down and just let me explain. Resident Evil 4 Remake is an excellent game. I'd argue the greatest remake so far, but unfortunately it's missing some of the most important aspects to what made the original so Resident Evil 4. What better place to start than the gameplay? The gameplay in this is outrageously satisfying and fun. Almost every area of the gameplay has been improved and given more fluidity and depth to its combat than I could have ever anticipated. The biggest change to combat being Leon's knife. This glorious piece of metal can deflect projectiles, block attacks, yes, even the chainsaw, which is anime as fuck, be used as a counter for when enemies grab you, and can even be used as a stealth weapon. In the original, the knife was pretty much the Krauser killer and the box opener, which worked for that game. However, in the remake, it's a tool that gives you access to multiple playstyles, whether it's being stealthy like Solid Snake, or battling your opponents head-on in hand-to-hand combat. What they did to balance this is add weapon durability, which actually balances this out quite well. The guns are all back as well, and they all feel really satisfying to blow enemies apart. There's nice variety with the weapon types, and just when you're starting to get tired of constantly using the same rifle, shotgun or pistol, the merchant will probably be selling another one, which keeps the gameplay's pacing consistently fresh and engaging. Enemy variety is also spot on in the remake, with very few enemy types being cut out, which is very nice to see. They're all far more aggressive and intimidating because of the gameplay pace in a remake. Original Resident Evil 4 enemies always just slowly walk towards you, unless it was the Wolverine enemy who just charged into you regardless of what you were doing. However, the redesigns for the enemies are a little more generic and uninteresting here. For example, the fat dudes on the island who looked like they came straight from Far Cry 3's Blood Dragon now just look far more generic, wearing these masks. Most designs are okay, besides obviously Salazar's and the Regenerators. They're not awful, but compared to the original, they are a bit of a downgrade. I mean, I don't even need to explain why, just look at the difference.
Me llamo Ramon Salazar, the 8th Castellan of this magnificent architecture. I have been honored with the prodigious power from the great Lord Sadler. I've been expecting you, my brethren.
A most warm welcome to my castle, Mr. Kennedy.
What was really cool about the remake is exploration is now a thing, with a couple of sections now having boat exploration. Like that one really good level in Resident Evil 5, if any of you guys played that. You can visit different sections on this giant lake and even get some really cool treasure and loot. This was one of the better additions in the game, and I really wish they had 1 or 2 more sections like this throughout the game, because you only do this one time, which makes it feel like a bit more of a gimmick than anything else, but it's still good.
Hasta luego.
God, I thank you for your gift.
You want to get ugly? Let's get ugly.
Okay, so in my opinion, the greatest thing this game did was its boss fight. Boss fights in this game are the best in the whole series, period. Each and every one of these guys have had more attacks and variations to their patterns that makes the fights feel way more interesting and engaging. They even added more phases to the fights, like Mendez's Circle of Fire, or Sadler fleeing the arena to send bugs after you, which, yeah, could be a bit worse. Little changes like that which improve the original is when this remake is at its best, although I am a little bit salty subtlety that the U3 was cut, I believe, because that was the scariest moment in the original game for me. The bosses as characters, however, have been kinda downgraded and changed in ways that annoy me, but we'll get to that later. Last big gameplay element I want to talk about is the merchant, which kinda transitions us into the two things I don't really like about this game, the inventory management and, we'll get to that. This guy is probably one of Resident Evil 4's most memorable elements, whether he's greeting you, saying cheesy shit, or being an all-around generous man. However, he's a lot more annoying in the remake. I always appreciated the subtlety in the original. He only ever said one of the 10 lines of dialogue he had, I'm guessing it's 10. And they were all memorable and iconic because the delivery was so over the top and campy. The remake's merchant never shuts the fuck up, however. Every time you buy a weapon, he'll spout some dumb shit, the funniest one being the rocket launcher.
Not my place to say, really, but sometimes things are more interesting if you keep a level playing field, don't you find?
This isn't a bad thing and I actually really like it, however the OG merchant was superior in every way. So if you want a tip for when you play this game, here's something you might want to keep in mind. Throughout the game, you have the option to buy a rocket launcher, and it costs a lot of cash. I think it's like 80,000 placentas. And what this does is it enables you to defeat any of the bosses in the game with one rocket. 100%, if you guys buy this game, use the fucking rocket launcher on these bosses at least once, because it is satisfying. God, there's no way. Ashley, oh my god. Ashley! I can't believe this! Ashley, what the fuck are you doing? Again! Oh my god! Fuck this AI! Fuck this game! Fuck this game! This is fucking awful! Okay, sorry about the raging, but let me talk about this girl for a little bit. So yeah, this girl killed me and made me scream louder than no AI has done before in a video game. Not even Sheva from Resident Evil 5, yes, the worst AI companion in all of gaming quite possibly, made me scream this loud. She has fucking horrible AI. She'll walk into enemies on purpose. She'll make no effort to run away from danger. She'll walk out of hiding spots during mid-combat, like what the fuck? And her AI is just infinitely worse compared to 20 years ago, dude, in the original Resident Evil 4. Also, the hitbox around her is crazy big, so if she gets picked up by enemies and you have to use the ranged weapon to save her, you're just fucked. Her character is also a lot more bland in this game compared to the previous. In original Resident Evil 4, she was a sassy, feminine, cute, and honestly quite endearing little girl. She definitely grew on you over time, even if it was a meme how many times she gets captured in that game. Like, I was laughing by the 7th time she was captured. In this game, she just feels very bland and generic, missing most of the charm that made her so lovable in the original. She doesn't even ask Leon for overtime in this game, which is fine. I just feel like it would have been a nice addition. They definitely tried to make her a bit more of a strong, independent woman, opposed to a damsel in distress. And personally, I kind of prefer my damsel in distress characters. I just find them more relatable, and I find them more endearing. And honestly, I think this game desperately needed Ashley to be a bit more like her original self. Because I didn't really care for her in this game. I just don't think she was that relatable. The game didn't really try to make me care for her in any way, which is unfortunate because I think she's a really good character. It's just she needed to be a bit more over the top, I feel like. For me, anyway. That's just my opinion. The story in Resident Evil 4 has always been cheesy B-movie schlock, and I've always loved it for that. Whether it was the bad action movie one-liners, the absurd moments, or the ridiculously over-the-top tone, but self-aware tone, there's something quite beautiful about the wacky nature of this game and how it's rare to experience a story that doesn't take itself too seriously. The remake, unfortunately, decides to go for a more serious tone, but keep the wacky nature of the experience. Many of the iconic one-liners are gone, and if they stayed, they've almost lost all the comedic value from the game. Every voice actor in the previous Resident Evil 4 has this line delivery of "I don't give a shit" attitude, or they're insanely over the top like Salazar. And I say that in the best possible way. I love the cheese. The cheese is what makes me whole, dude. I love it. What the remake instead does is make everyone act very serious, which doesn't quite work for me. I really prefer the over-the-top shit in Resident Evil 4 that isn't here, and I just wish the remake committed to that, but I understand why they didn't do it. It wouldn't really work for this generation. What this does is unfortunately make all the characters, with the exception of Luis, because they did him quite well in the remake, feeling like discount downgrades of themselves. This is most prevalent with the villains by far. Salazar is now this serious little man syndrome dude who has lost all the charm that made him so fun and memorable. You didn't know, he used to be this petulant child who would constantly make bad jokes and call you on your radio just to talk shit. He's basically a Discord troll who just wants to piss the player off. Some of the best dialogue in this game was between these two fucking legends.
So maybe you have 9 lives, but it doesn't matter now, Mr. Kennedy. I've sent my right hand to dispose of you.
Your right hand comes off?
Say whatever you please. Die, you worm!
Now he's just a shell of his former self, because this game desperately doesn't want to be a dumb action game and wants to take itself a bit more seriously compared to the original. But honestly, that's not all that much of a big deal. That's kind of just me bitching. What really offends me is the cut content in this thing. Not only is arguably the best boss in the original game gone, the U3 was so fucking scary, and the level design of that encounter was so claustrophobic, it still gives me nightmares. Separate Ways and Assignment Ada are gone as well, which really confuses me. I mean, yeah, Separate Ways was ultimately a little forgettable when compared to the base game. However, there were some really interesting boss fights that added to the game, like that completely fucking bullshit Saddler fight that took me well over 10 minutes to beat on a normal difficulty. Like, this is probably the most bullshit boss in a video game ever. Like, this guy is fucking horrible. Like, nobody likes this boss. Assignment Ada I don't really care about because it's a fucking leaderboard. It's a leaderboard minigame, that's what it is. However, it was packaged into the original, so I have to bring it up here as cut content. By the way, me and my dad always played Assignment Ada. We would always try and play it and see who could kill the most enemies and get the highest score, who could collect these, what was it, I think it was syringes throughout the map to get the highest score. It was fucking sweet. If it sounds like I hate this remake, I just want you to know that I don't. This is probably going to be my game of the year. For a lot of reviews on this fucking website, if you make one tiny criticism to any of the areas in a popular game that everyone likes, you're kind of seen as a contrarian and people don't like you all of a sudden. That's kind of how the internet works. If you criticize one tiny element of a game, people hate you. I mean, that's the... That's the way the website works. And I just want you guys to know, I fucking love this game. It's easily an 8 or 9 out of 10. I just wish to get that 10 out of 10, they just had to do a few things that's very nitpicky towards me. This is probably a 10 out of 10 game for most of you, because you're going to go into this game with a fresh experience. But for me, I have the context of the original, and I just wanted to see some of that stuff in the original that made it so iconic and special, ported over to here, and unfortunately that didn't happen. But don't worry guys, you're not going to miss out on anything. You're going to love this game, I promise you. Just to quickly sum up my points on the game, I think the gameplay has been revitalized in ways that I could never anticipate. Combat, shooting, and the way you engage with enemies being improved for this kind of game. Honestly, I don't think it's better or worse than the original, because the original had stationary shooting where you just stood still and aimed at enemies with a laser sight on your weapons. I personally sway more towards the original's direction, but that's just me because I'm a fucking OG and I like the stationary shooting. I always have. The story is really fun, with plenty of new moments and changes that shake up the story in interesting ways. Sometimes they make narrative decisions that complement the story, and sometimes they've made questionable decisions that do the remake trope of unnecessary tampering with things we love. Throughout the 12-hour experience, I can confirm that this is 100% worth your time. Gameplay is solid, boss fights are amazing, the overall level design and combat encounters are worth seeing, and the story offers some interesting new content, but be warned, this is not a 100% faithful remake, so if you're an OG, things are going to be changed and it may frustrate you, so just set your expectations. Thanks for watching, guys. My next video is probably going to be on the Mario movie. I've heard they've now made Luigi a cuck and Peach a badass, so that should be interesting. Honestly, I've never really given a shit about Mario because I've never really played any of the games apart from Sunshine, which I really loved. But I'll remain an open mind for you guys. Please do the things the algorithm likes. Please subscribe. I just hit 100 subscribers. I'm fucking boasting about that. And supporting the channel in any way you can. I'd really appreciate that. So I'll see you next week with the Mario review. And hopefully it doesn't suck, but we'll have to see.